Hey everyone, Reaper here again with another video. This time the topic is, do I read my comics? Well, do you read your comics? Well, I have to say that I don't read any of the modern stuff. On occasion I might read something modern, but that is incredibly rare. Okay, I know there are people out there that buy the new issues, whatever the issues are, and they like to read them and all that stuff. And people argue that comics are meant for reading. Yeah, I understand that. But I really don't read anything new. Um, every now and then, I like to go back and read some of my older stuff. Stuff that's from the Golden Age, the Silver Age, and even some of the Bronze Age stuff. Maybe even some of the Copper stuff. So I think every age, more or less, is included in books that occasionally I like to read. But I was always very picky on what I read, even back when I first started collecting. So I guess the short answer is yes and no. Mostly no when it comes to all the new stuff. I can't tell you the last time I read something new. But I will share with you some of the things that I enjoyed reading, and every now and then I wouldn't mind cracking open to read again today. Now, I know that some of the storytelling in comics that were released decades ago were some will argue is kind of silly because it was meant for children. Well, yeah, we all understand that. But despite that, there are several from all the different ages that I very much enjoyed. I'm not going to cover every single one. I might do another video on that because there's quite a few. But some of the ones that I enjoy reading very much, and I'll start off with these two. These are the first two Marvel comics I read. X-Men 141 and 142. The Days of Future Past storyline, as you know, became a movie. How many years ago was it now? 6 years ago, whatever it came out. When I read these, and I originally took interest in reading these because of the cartoon series back in 1993 did an adaptation of this storyline. So it was really through that adaptation that I started to get into superhero books and became a full-time collector, at least back then, and sprinkles into what's going on today. One of the reasons why I decided to read that, or I took interest in reading that, I saw the episode on the TV series, cartoon series, and I wanted to read that, is because it had a more adult theme to it. Okay, it had a more adult theme to it, and that's what really drew me into some of the superhero books, even though most superhero books didn't have that at the time, or at least at that stage of my collecting. Yes, The Watchmen had come out years before that, which was similar, an adult theme. Sandman is adult theme, but I didn't know anything about those characters or those stories. So, but when it came to X-Men, a team that I really, really grew to like, and found out that they had a storyline that was really adult themed, I gravitated to it. Okay? Now, even before that, I didn't consider myself a comic book collector because I was getting the reprints whenever I could find them. The reprints of these. Now, I'm just going to show the one volume. I'm not going to show every volume of EC Horrors. But the reason why I'm showing you this particular one, Volume 1 of the Tales from the Crypt collection, because Volume 1 was my favorite. Volumes 2, 3, 4, and 5 are good too. Some better than others. But this was always my favorite. I've found that how many issues are in here? It's from 17 to 22. Most of those issues had a lot of good stuff in them. And stuff that I could definitely, we talk about cracking open again today, reading it and enjoying it just as much as I enjoyed it back then. I can do that today with these. So, really a lot of good fond memories of reading these, and I would like to, I could read these again today. Like I said, it starts with Crypt of Terror 17, which is technically the very first issue of Tales from the Crypt after Crime Patrol. And these things were great. I mean, I remember reading them back then, and I was a little upset that they were in black and white. You know, I would have liked to have read them in color, like some of the Gladstone reprints that were coming out at that time, but these were still good. I mean, they eventually released these things over and over again in color, and I think they released these type of things, hardcovers, not as big as these, but hardcovers, I think a few years ago on color too. EC Archives, I think they were called. But really had an impact on me. The early issues of Tales from the Crypt, from Crypt of Terror 17 all the way to right here, Tales from the Crypt 22. And as I have right here, eventually I got all the real issues. Crypt of Terror 17, Crypt of Terror 18, Crypt of Terror 19. Then the series becomes Tales from the Crypt with number 20. Tales from the Crypt 21. And the last one in that volume, with the now more familiar, famous Tales from the Crypt logo, Tales from the Crypt 22. So yeah, reading those has definitely had an impact on me. Big impact where I would like to actually, where I wanted to get the original copies. I eventually did. It took years to do because, you know, a lot of them they're not easy to find sometimes. Or sometimes they're not easy to pay for when you do find them. But aside from that, aside from Days of Future Past and the EC books, when I got that first batch of comics, which followed shortly after the Days of Past books, I talked about this years ago in my comic history. I got a bunch of Marvel Milestone reprints, and among them was the reprint of this, which now I was fortunate enough to get the real copy years later, of Fantastic Four #1. At that time, I never even heard of the Fantastic. I mean, I've heard of them, you know, through the cards that were coming out. I knew Mr. Fantastic and stuff, but prior to that, I didn't even know who they were. I've heard of Spider-Man. I've heard of X-Men. I've heard of the Hulk. I think I've heard of Captain America, but other characters like Iron Man, the Fantastic Four, never heard of those characters. So when I saw this in the pile which that guy gave me, Gilbert gave me, I read it and I was pleasantly surprised with the story. I actually enjoyed it. Fantastic Four #1 really is a hybrid. You know, this was the very first Marvel comic. It's a hybrid of what Marvel was doing at that time and where they wanted to go. What they were doing at that time was a lot of monster books, creatures like the one you see here, the mole monster, other creatures like Fing Fang Foom, the dragon, and rock creatures, and all that stuff that was really popular with Atlas Comics, which became Marvel Comics in the 50s. But then Stan Lee wanted to move towards superheroes, having their own superheroes, like the superhero teams like Justice League and so forth. So he brought both of those things together. He had to have monsters in it because he wanted it to sell and he wanted to please the publisher at that time. And when it became a hit, he was able to do more superhero stuff, and that's when other characters started to come out. Other series like Ant-Man, Hulk, Thor, Spider-Man, Iron Man, X-Men, and the list goes on. And soon the monsters started to disappear, and here came the superheroes of the Silver Age. And the Marvel Age of Comics, as it's called. A couple more things, a couple more books that I could read again and again that I really enjoyed back then as much as I enjoy them today. Now, this one I have to show, Amazing Spider-Man 121. It's The Death of Gwen Stacy. This one did not have that much of an impact on me as it had some other people that have been collecting for many, many years, especially when they were, you know, young kids in the early 70s when this came out. But this one was the one that I really liked. The Death of the Green Goblin, 122. This was the one that I really enjoyed reading. And at the end of the first Spider-Man movie, you see, you know, the way the Green Goblin dies in this, he dies similarly in the movie where his own glider impales him. So, you know, it was cool that the movie kept that from the comic. Another one, only two more here I want to talk about. Another book that I enjoyed very much because I liked the character, The Hobgoblin, Amazing Spider-Man 238. I like the way the Hobgoblin discovered the Green Goblin's lab, and there was big mystery on who the Hobgoblin was for many, many years, and it turned out to be Ned Leeds. And I know they sort of botched that story. They try to, retcon it to something else. I don't know. To me, the Hobgoblin will always be Ned Leeds. But it was cool that they really generated a lot of interest for this character, another Goblin. And no one knew who he was. And there were always little hints around that who might be the Hobgoblin. Is it, this character, is it Flash Thompson? Who could it be? Who could it be? And eventually we got our answer. But around the time when the Hobgoblin, they decided to phase out the Ned Leeds version of the Hobgoblin, they had something else in mind, which was another book, my last book for this video, that I could read over and over again, and I did read over and over again when it first came out. As Hobgoblin was phased out, here comes Venom, almost like an evil version of Spider-Man. He's got the suit, he's got Spider-Man's abilities, but it's an alien creature, and over a real psychotic character. I thought that, Spider-Man 3, as you know, that came out in 2007, the last of the Raimi Spider-Man films, they had, what's his name? I forget the actor's name that played Venom. Not dissing him, not saying that he doesn't have talent or anything, but he was just completely wrong for that part. And the writers treated the Venom character completely wrong as well. Tom Hardy, as we all know, now plays Venom. Is he a better pick? He's probably a better pick, but, I like him, but I don't know, maybe some people agree with me. There's still something off about Venom, or at least the current Venom we have, when either it's the way Tom Hardy portrayed him, or the way the character's written for the movies, and the direction in which it seems like it's going. Something seems off. It doesn't seem like the Venom that we have in Spider-Man 300 and the Venom that we saw later in subsequent issues of Spider-Man. It's just something that's different. But that being said, I loved the way the story was written. Of course, Todd McFarlane drew this, a very popular, famous cover that's been swiped over and over again by many, many artists and many, many different companies, even by Todd McFarlane. But wonderful. I felt this was a real wonderful read, and something that I could read over and over again. And it's really important to me, this book. Really, really important to me. Now, there are other books. Like I said, I might do another video showing off some other books that I enjoyed reading and that I would still read today. There are some that I read back in the day, like Maximum Carnage, that I enjoyed, that I was looking forward to, that I wouldn't give any time to today. Because it's just, it's just one of those things that really didn't last. It didn't stand the test of time for me as these books. So what about you? Do you still read your books? Do you read new books? What do you do? Be interested to let me know in the comments. Take care, everyone.